Many of the cities I go here are more similar to second world conditions. If you go to some of the newer areas in the U.S., they're okay. But you go out to California, you go to the Rust Belt areas, many of these, the infrastructure there, roads, bridges, these are decades or if not 100 years old. We're really living off our infrastructure built by our parents and our grandparents. We've built hardly anything new in the last 30, 40, 50 years. So it's always shocking for me to come back from China. I joke with my American friends that when I go back to China, I'm going back to first world conditions, and they don't really get that. But
now, Dan, in the first half of the show, I was speaking with Stacy Herbert, and we were talking about China versus the U.S. and centrally planned economies. And I was making the point that here's two centrally planned economies, and they're both basically doomed to fail. Stacy, I think, thinks perhaps that the Chinese economy is set to become number one in the world. And what are your thoughts?
I'm a big doubter of centrally planned economies, whether that's in China or the United States. Reality, though, is China is, although it has massive problems as well, it is much more capitalistic in many ways now than the United States. It's much more real economy driven, whereas the United States has been taken over by the financial system. In China, they're number one in most markets, number one in online retail this year. 2008, China had no high-speed rail. By 2010, they'd passed Europe. By 2012, they have more high-speed rail than the rest of the world combined. So they have access, real economy power projection to get things done. Jobs, wages are increasing. There's no debt and credit market like the United States has. I come over here, everything's on debt, everything's on credit. You pay anything in cash or with from a debit card, they're shocked you're not financing it. So in China, everything's, half the homes have been paid cash up front. It's very still capitalistic economy compared to the U.S. now, where we have 47 million people on food stamps. We have 65% of working age men that have a job, and a quarter of those make $10 an hour or less. The real statistics of American production are really at depression levels. We actually produced 7 million cars this year. We produced 13 million cars in the year 2000. This is the United States. We're selling levels again, but half of those cars are imported. So real economy power in the United States is almost gone. It's become a financial and debt-driven economy.
Yeah, I want to focus on that for a second, Dan. You mentioned that U.S. has become a financial and debt-driven economy versus China, which is more manufacturing. And so the response in 2008 to the global crisis, America got more financialized. They have bailed out the banks, and the banks have gotten even bigger than they were when they were too big to fail to begin with. You've got financialization now reaching into every market imaginable. People complain that there's a huge student loan debt market bubble ready to burst. I just read that they are now creating loans for preschoolers so that parents can go out and get themselves into hock to finance their child's preschool education in anticipation of their college education. But that's primarily how these two countries are separated economically. If I'm reading you correctly, Dan, is that the U.S. still relies on over-financialization and caters to Wall Street, and China's out there making stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. China has not continued with the aggressive quantitative easing the last year or two like the United States has. They've shut that off. Cities are imposing limits. You can't buy more than one house. So they're trying to rationalize and rebalance the economy and take the hard medication now, where the United States has just gone deeper and deeper into financialization, and all that printed money has found its way into the stock market. But we've done nothing to address the real problems like the tax system, which was just ranked 94th out of 100 tax systems globally, just behind Zimbabwe. So we've done nothing to rebalance the real economy in the U.S. and fix the structural problems that exist. China has their own problems, but they're much easier problems to fix when you have $4 trillion in currency reserves. Everyone has a job, and education levels are increasing. The positive aspects of Chinese society are really in a renaissance. The things I look at, you look at space exploration. NASA has a budget 17 times larger than Chinese space agency's budget. Yet China launched twice as many space missions last year as NASA did. This goes in industry after industry. You can see the overall decay of the real economy in the United States in favor of financialization.
All right, Dan Collins, what about the state of the Chinese worker? So in America, we see tens of millions on food stamps. Most new jobs are part-time in retail or restaurant. So I would take it that in China, you see manufacturing jobs and real jobs, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on the board of a few companies here. We've increased wages 200% in the last 3 to 4 years. You still have trouble finding workers. The average Chinese manufacturing worker is now making 5, 6, 700, 800 US dollars a month. Obviously still very, very low, but these are up from levels of 100 or $200 a month, only 5, 6 years ago. So it's really good times for the average Chinese worker in China. And these are all full-time jobs. They're really part-time jobs that are unheard of in China. We just don't have them.
Yeah, just as a point of interest, in China, there is no quote-unquote social safety net. There's no social security. There's no pension schemes per se. For this reason, Chinese people tend to be very aggressive savers, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Chinese, I think, on average, obviously number one in savings in the world. They save around 40% of their take-home. So, yeah, they're number one in savings. There's almost zero social net in China. If you don't work, you don't eat, basically. So that's why they're so hardworking, is that everyone's got to pay for themselves or pay for their family.
All right. Now, a lot of talk about ghost cities. So what are ghost cities in China? What's it all about? Is it a form of savings by the middle class, as some suggest, as we, to pick up on what we were just saying, that there is no safety net and people are out there savings, and part of that savings is housing. Is that correct, Dan?
Yeah, I think, ghost cities we need to separate from the actual Chinese real estate market. So ghost cities are really areas where the government has misallocated resources, and there's different areas or so-called new parts of a city that the government wants to develop. They'll go ahead and authorize all this development, and developers will go up there and build up apartments, schools, hospitals, everything. Within 6 months, you'll have an entire new city there. And that's where they get the reputation of these ghost cities. Now, a lot of these will be, with the urbanization still going on in China, a lot of these cities get filled up in a year, 2 years. It's not a matter of there are empty homes, but they're getting filled up and they're actually owned by somebody without a loan. So there are areas in particular, some really bad, high-profile problems with a few ghost cities or ghost areas. But in general, the real estate market here is very, very strong. Property prices are up again, double-digit this year. Property transactions are up 30%. As I mentioned before, half of the homes have been paid cash up front. And in general, now in China, they put in rules to stop you from buying more than one home. And if you're from Shanghai, you want to buy a home in Shanghai, you have to be from Shanghai. So there's a lot of restrictions now just to stop people from over speculating in homes. So I don't really see it as a bubble as yet. Most people, and Chinese in particular, plan to buy homes and own them for decades and decades and give them to their children, as opposed to the flipping and using homes as a speculative vehicle like found in the United States.
Okay, so I guess the idea here is that what people are used to is that a developer will build 5 or 10 homes, and they are looking to expand their residential property portfolio, and then they go out and they market those homes. But in China, they build entire cities on the same concept, and then they fill up the entire cities. Okay, now let's talk about the environment in China. We've had some environmental disasters. They're starting to cost as much as the economy is producing. So this is a hard ceiling for economic growth in China. They found heavy metals in the soil covering large swathes of the arable land. So this is the detritus of industrialization now biting them in the veritable pork bun. What are they going to do about it?
Yeah, the environment, I believe, is China's number one overarching problem right now. And it's going to be one of their toughest problems to fix. The air in the major cities is almost unlivable. You mentioned about soil contamination. They found 30–40% of cropland in some provinces are contaminated with heavy metals. We have cancer villages stretching 1,000 kilometers through several provinces. It's an absolute disaster. The only way to really deal with it, I guess I could say on the positive side, is the government and people realize it. Some of the largest protests the last several years have been over the environment. You get tens of thousands of people out on the streets over this. So the government, I think, is at least aware of the problem now. They need to start the cleanup. There's going to be a lot of economic activity behind that. The problem is with, as you mentioned, the industrialization of China. The whole world has shut down factories, and they're all in China now. And China, in my opinion, as I probably mentioned several years ago, they need to let the renminbi come up, let Chinese living standards come up, let the rest of the world start producing for their own economies and even exporting into China. So-called, stop the industrialization of China, really where it is, more focused, higher value-added products, which is happening as a part of a so-called rebalancing of the Chinese economy. But that's really where they need to go on the environment. It's absolutely the number one problem now in China.
All right, Dan Collins, we're out of time. Thanks so much for being on the Kaiser Report.
Thanks very much.